I manage a mid-sized grocery store working long overnight shifts. The hours are grueling, 10-hour shifts mostly by myself. At the time, we were severely understaffed and it felt like every department was running on fumes. The overnight stocking crew was barely holding it together, and I was usually left to do most of it alone. I had one guy who'd help me 5 nights a week, but tonight was his day off, leaving me to handle it all on my own. It was around 10 p.m. when I clocked in, and by 10:15 I was already alone in the store. The stillness of the night felt almost suffocating. I headed to the office to run some numbers, but the pressure of everything weighing on me quickly pushed me to get to work. Boxes piled high in the back needed to be unpacked and stocked. Despite being on my own, I had to get everything done. It was the kind of task that didn't leave room for breaks or distractions. The store was unnervingly quiet, the kind of quiet that only night shifts bring. The lights hummed faintly above me as I moved through the aisles, unloading boxes, my footsteps echoing off the cold tiles. My mind was occupied with the endless work ahead when, suddenly, I heard a faint tapping sound. It echoed across the store, sharp and out of place. I paused, listening intently, but nothing followed. I shook it off, thinking it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Then a second tapping. I froze. This time, I recognized the sound. It was coming from the front of the store, like someone tapping on the window. I looked at my watch. It was 2 a.m. I hadn't realized how much time had passed, but there was no reason anyone should be out there. We were closed. I cautiously walked down the aisle and made my way to the front. As I neared the entrance, I saw him. A man standing outside the store, his face pressed against the glass, trying to peer inside. He spotted me as I approached and stared at me, unmoving, as if waiting for me to make the first move. I stepped up to the window, close enough to speak to him. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, trying to mask the unease creeping up my spine. The man, looking like he hadn't bathed in days, responded in a flat voice. "Open the door." His tone was calm, but there was no hint of friendliness, no request. Just a cold, flat demand. I shook my head. "We're closed." "You can't be here," I said firmly, then turned to walk away. But just as I turned, the tapping stopped, and was replaced by harsh, angry banging. It was violent, jarring, like his fist was slamming against the glass with all his might. I spun around, startled. The man's face had contorted into an expression of pure rage, his fist pounding against the glass in fury. My heart skipped a beat. I quickly pulled out my phone, prepared to call the police if necessary. "I'll call the cops if you don't leave," I said, my voice shaking slightly as I unlocked my phone. The man stopped. For a moment, I thought he might come inside anyway, but instead he stepped back, his eyes still burning with anger. He didn't say another word as he turned and walked off into the parking lot. His footsteps echoed in the stillness of the night as I stood frozen, watching him go. I quickly put my phone away and tried to steady my breathing. I had to get back to work. This was probably just some random guy, I told myself. People were strange, especially at night. Despite the unsettling encounter, I did my best to focus on the task at hand. The store was still eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes you feel like you're being watched. I was still shaken, but I pushed the feeling aside and got back to unpacking the boxes. Maybe it was my nerves, but the night felt different now, as though something had shifted. I was only able to stock a small cart of boxes when I heard a new sound, a loud, metallic scrape, like something had snapped or was being dragged across the floor. My heart skipped, and I instantly dropped what I was doing. My mind raced as I rushed toward the front of the store. As I rounded the corner, I saw nothing. The windows were empty. No sign of the man. No movement. Just the soft hum of the lights above me. But then, I saw something that made my stomach turn. The revolving door at the entrance, usually locked with a bolt on top, was open. But the bolt was missing. I pressed my hand against the glass, feeling it glide easily. The bolt was gone. It wasn't just unlocked, it was completely removed. My blood ran cold. Someone had been inside. I stepped back, my mind scrambling to make sense of it. I had to call the police. This wasn't just some random tapping or knocking anymore. Someone had been inside, and that man, he wasn't just an angry customer. He had been trying to get in. I turned to head for the office to make the call, but then I froze. He was there, standing in front of me. That same man, his face twisted in a look of rage that made my skin crawl. He was only a few feet away, standing there like he had appeared from nowhere. His eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. No words. just that terrifying stare. My heart pounded in my chest, the fear flooding my body. Without thinking, I bolted for the revolving door. I could hear his footsteps behind me, quick and heavy as I ran. As I sprinted toward the parking lot, a van came speeding toward the store, tires screeching as it came dangerously close to hitting me. I barely managed to dodge it, heart hammering in my chest as I ran faster. The man's footsteps were still behind me, too close for comfort. But when I reached my car, I glanced over my shoulder, and the man had stopped chasing me. The van screeched out of the parking lot, and the man disappeared into the night. I locked myself in the car and called the police, my hands shaking as I explained everything that had happened. I stayed there for what felt like hours, waiting for the authorities to arrive. The whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just barely escaped something far worse. The next day, the police sent me the security footage. The image was grainy, but it was enough to confirm what I had feared. The man had been trying to get me to come outside to lure me into that van. The footage was unclear, but it showed him at the entrance pacing back and forth, clearly waiting for me to make a mistake. We'll never know exactly why he was there, but I know one thing for sure. If I hadn't been quick, I probably wouldn't have been seen again. It was the kind of night that felt eerily quiet, a Saturday evening in late August. I was 16 at the time, bored, restless. School had been draining and I needed a way to unwind. The house was empty. My mom and sister were out shopping and my dad was working late. It was the perfect time to disconnect. I decided to hit up my friends, Griffin and Broly, and get into a game of Fortnite. The clock ticked past 8 p.m. before we finally jumped into the game. I'd made pizza rolls earlier, but in my distracted state, I'd burned the whole batch. I wasn't exactly in the mood to eat anymore. My friends and I played for about an hour, but their enthusiasm was fading fast as they kept losing round after round. They signed off, leaving me alone in my room. I figured I'd spend the rest of the night scrolling on my phone and going to bed. But then the dogs started barking. That wasn't unusual. They often barked at passing pedestrians. But something about it didn't sit right. I got up and walked over to the window. The street outside was empty, but as soon as I looked away, I heard it, the unmistakable sound of our garage door opening and then slamming shut. I froze. My dad had texted earlier saying he'd be late, and I didn't hear his van pull up. Yet there was the unmistakable sound of the door, like someone had entered the house. My heart began to pound in my chest. Was it him or was something wrong? I rushed downstairs, my mind racing. I peeked through the dining room window. Nothing. The driveway was completely empty. No car. No person. I wasn't the type to go investigate. It didn't feel right, so I turned around and sprinted back to my room, reaching for my phone. I quickly texted the family group chat, "Is anyone home?" No response. I told my mom about the garage door and her response was clear. "Turn off the lights. Lock your door. Stay in your room until I get home." I did exactly that, locking the door behind me, my body tingling with fear. Something wasn't right. Time passed, but it felt like hours. Then it happened. I heard it, a creak from downstairs. A slow, deliberate sound, like someone was stepping carefully, trying not to be heard. My heartbeat raced. I didn't have anything to defend myself with, so I grabbed the boom arm from my microphone, clutching it in my trembling hands like it could somehow protect me. With a deep breath, I quietly cracked the door open and stepped into the hallway. My senses were on high alert. The air felt thick, suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tiptoed to the balcony, hoping for a glimpse of whoever, or whatever, was in the house. That's when I saw it. A figure. A large silhouette standing just beneath the balcony looking up at me. My heart stopped and then panic took over. I bolted toward the nearest room, the bathroom, locking myself inside with shaking hands. I could hear footsteps, fast, angry, and heading straight up the stairs. The intruder knew I had seen them. I was trapped, no phone, no way to call for help. The sound of the footsteps grew louder and louder as they neared my bedroom. I waited. My breath came in shallow gasps. I couldn't think straight. I needed to get out. When I couldn't take it anymore, I dashed back to my room, slamming the door behind me. My sister's room just across the hall was wide open and I knew, without a doubt, the intruder was in there. I grabbed my phone, typed 911, my fingers numb with fear, ready to call for help. That's when I saw it. A slight crack in the wall. Just enough for something to peer through. A dark brown eye. It was staring at me. cold, unmoving, watching me. I froze. The terror was overwhelming. My stomach twisted and I felt like I couldn't breathe. Without thinking, I ran. I raced down the stairs, out the front door, and up the hill to my neighbor's house. My heart hammered in my chest, but I couldn't stop. I needed help. My neighbor was a police officer. He immediately alerted the others while I stayed with his wife, trying to steady my shaking hands. He rushed down to my house to investigate. Minutes later, he called for backup. I ran back down the hill, hoping they'd caught the intruder. When I entered the house, I saw it. The man, tall, skinny, with a gray beard, was being pinned to the floor by my neighbor, his arms behind his back, handcuffed. I couldn't believe it. It was over. Now I'm never home alone anymore. Our security has been upgraded and my family's just happy I'm safe. My neighbor's bravery saved me that night, and I'll never forget the fear I felt. It was late, around 1 a.m. I had just finished a few deliveries, working for DoorDash as a side gig. It wasn't anything major, just a way to make some extra cash, usually around 10 to 15 hours a week. Tonight, however, I wasn't planning to do much, just a couple of quick orders before calling it a night. One of the deliveries I picked up took me to a business building on the other side of town, a place I didn't recognize. The address was strange, almost too quiet for a business area. When I pulled into the parking lot, my heart sank. It was completely empty. No cars. No lights. Not even a single soul walking in sight. I had done plenty of late-night deliveries before, and it wasn't uncommon to deliver to places like offices or warehouses that were closed for the night. But this place felt different. A weird, unsettling silence hung in the air, almost suffocating. I parked near the front of the building, getting out of my car with the food in hand. The building was a 2-story office space. It was small, narrow, and looked like it hadn't seen any visitors in a long time. The windows were dark except for a faint light coming from behind the front door, a dull glow that seemed out of place. I stood there for a moment, staring at the entrance. My breath seemed to catch in my throat. I didn't know why, but I had a bad feeling about this one. It was just a delivery, I told myself. I checked the app to confirm the instructions. They were clear. Enter the building, head to the main hallway, and leave the food bag outside room 232. Easy enough, right? I walked toward the door, trying to shake off the unease. The door clicked open and I stepped inside. Immediately, the silence hit me like a wall. There wasn't a sound in the entire building. No voices, no movement, nothing. The only noise was the faint hum of the overhead lights, buzzing quietly above. The smell of dust and old carpet filled the air, and the temperature was oddly cold. I wasn't sure if it was the air conditioning or just the emptiness, but it sent a chill down my spine. As I walked into the hallway, I noticed the doors to the side were all numbered in the 100s. 102, 106, and so on. The instructions on the app said that room 232 was where I needed to drop the food. That meant it was on the second floor. I walked a little further, keeping an eye out for the staircase, trying to make sense of the layout. In the middle of the hallway, I saw a door leading up to the second floor. The door was slightly wedged open with a doorstop, but the stairs beyond it were completely dark. No lights. Just the oppressive blackness that seemed to stretch on forever. I paused for a moment, feeling the weight of the silence pressing in on me. My heart started beating a little faster. There was something about this place. It didn't feel right. But the instructions were clear, so I pushed forward. I stepped toward the staircase and glanced up. The darkness above seemed to swallow any sense of direction. There wasn't a single light on the second floor, no sense of life at all. Just an empty, ominous void. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Every instinct in me told me to turn around and leave. This wasn't like the usual late-night deliveries. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I stood there at the bottom of the stairs, my mind racing. Something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Still, I couldn't ignore the drop-off instructions. I had a job to do and I wasn't about to break the rules. With a deep breath, I stepped into the stairwell. The stairs creaked under my feet as I slowly climbed, the sound of each step echoing unervingly through the empty hallway. The further I went, the heavier the silence felt. The air was thick, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The darkness at the top of the stairs seemed endless, a black hole pulling me in. The coldness in the air made my skin prickle and my heart began to race. My palms were sweaty and my mind kept telling me to turn back. But I couldn't. I reached the bottom of the stairs and paused, trying to gather my thoughts. The sense of dread gnawed at me, but the thought of the instructions on the app kept me moving forward. I glanced back toward the hallway. The faint light from the entrance seemed like a distant memory. Then, just as I was about to step back into the hallway, the door right across from me creaked open. I froze. A man stepped out. He was wearing street clothes, nothing that would suggest he worked at an office, let alone in the middle of the night. He looked disheveled, his expression unreadable. He stood there, blocking the path, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that felt like it could pierce right through me. "Room 232 is up there," he said, pointing toward the stairs behind me. His voice was low and flat, but there was something about it that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. His tone was almost dismissive, like he was trying to direct me to something I wasn't supposed to see. I nodded, too stunned to speak, and instinctively took a step back. The man didn't move. He just stood there, staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. His eyes were intense, cold, and there was a strange hostility behind them, like he was suppressing some kind of anger. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. My heart raced faster, my breathing shallow. I didn't want to be there anymore. But I couldn't leave the food just sitting in the hallway either. I dropped the bag at my feet, my hands shaking. I didn't say anything. I just turned and started walking toward the exit. I could hear the man's footsteps behind me as I rushed to the door. I pushed it open and ran to my car, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I pulled out of the parking lot, my heart still pounding in my chest. What had just happened? My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer. I couldn't shake the image of that man's eyes, and the cold, suffocating air of the building. The next day my phone rang. It was the police. They told me there had been a break-in at that office building, and they had traced the incident back to my car. They mentioned the CCTV footage, asking if I had seen anything unusual. My stomach dropped. I explained the delivery, but it seemed like the police already knew more than I did. They told me that there were 3 people involved in the break-in. One of them was the man I had seen, the one who had pointed toward the stairs. But the other 2 were captured on the cameras, hiding at the top of the stairs, waiting for me to walk up. The police said they had footage of the break-in, but what really unsettled me was the fact that multiple deliveries had been made to the same building that night. I wasn't the only driver. But unlike me, all the others had left their orders outside by the front door. None of them had gone inside. I couldn't help but wonder, what would have happened if I had gone up those stairs? What would they have done if I had walked into that trap? I shuddered at the thought. The police didn't know what had happened yet, but they were investigating. The 3 men were still at large. And I knew deep down that I had narrowly avoided something truly horrific. The darkness is always watching. If you want more stories that send chills down your spine, like, share and subscribe to Dark Echoes. Stay safe or don't. We'll see you next time.